Pretty ready. Day one. Jesus, started already. 8 o'clock start time. Oh.
Okay, shall we try?
Mr. Arkin, is your volume up at all? I just started off. Okay. We're live. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. It is May 25th, 2021. It's currently 8:03 p.m. So could you please call the order for the special board meeting? Oh wait, I'm sorry, people want to get into the virtual. All right, it's permitted by government districts executive orders 2020-07 and 2020-33. The OPRF request high school certification at the county eliminates the remote special board meeting on May 25th, 2021. Board members, citizens, and staff have to participate in the meeting virtually. If they want to recognize staff and staff declaration related to COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. The health department continues to advise to continue the practice of social distancing or face masks and avoid unnecessary contact with others. Based on this current public health concerns, I satisfy these public bodies. That we would be a prudent or practical avoiding and just using other board of education on Thursday. And whether we can do a practical activity. For the public, who's present for the public bodies, regular meeting location. And we're going to continue to hold our meeting with updated practices to comply with public health on 1-40. So the same that we're just on June 12th, 2020. Mr. Godfrey?
Here.
Ms. Mohammed? Here. Mr. Arkin?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Markiri?
Here.
Ms. Mary? Here. And Mr. Stone? Okay, and today marks the one-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder. I'd like to take a moment of silence and contemplation. Yeah. one is from Michael Pearson. Dear Board of Education members, I am the attorney for Royal, ready to ask you to consider working with Royal on actions related to your grading policies and practices. Specifically, I want to direct your attention to ISP, some findings and grading practices for this year at page 97 of the fall 2020 grading recommendation. In that document, ISP stated that local districts should consider the following as the account for flexible instruction on maintaining best practices for grading. Those practices include flexibility, empathy, and understanding that the students' varying personal situations should be taken into account. Local districts should provide multiple methods of work submission for students to demonstrate them. In grading, local districts should make sure to take into account that students are receiving different and often reduced levels of support than they are accustomed to. This guidance matches and supports Royal's demands. As such, on behalf of Royal, I ask you to take seriously the demand that you ensure an equitable outcome this school year and that you use your substantial discretion under the school code to implement a grading policy for this year that offers alternative methods for students to demonstrate growth and subject mastery, including oral examinations. That no student should fail in class this school year. I understand that the board and the administration believe they have put safety valves to prevent students from failing classes, but as the parent of two children, I can say that the way individual teachers carry out these plans varies widely. Any student who is unhappy with the grade this school year should be given a chance to make it up or change it before they graduate. It is simply unsure that all students have equal opportunities this year, and most students should have the GPA impacted by the pandemic. My name is Chloe, and I am a senior at Chloe. My name is Chloe, and I'm a senior at Oak Forest High School. During my senior year, I was hospitalized for mental health reasons. It was a struggle for me emotionally, physically, and mentally to get back on track and finish my school year off successfully. You might look at my grades and say, wow, she succeeded this year. The administration doesn't see the anxiety, the fear of losing myself in my grades, the tears and struggle to finish my assignment. You don't know the battle of whether I should focus on a project or on mental health. Yes, I do have the capacity to work hard to be strong, but I advocate for those who didn't. The ones who had a job because their parents lost their job, the ones who left back one assignment to the rest of it, the ones who couldn't get out of bed, the ones who had to watch their siblings, their younger siblings, so that their parents could focus on work, the ones who were traumatized by seeing images of themselves dying daily due to police and gun violence. I am tired of the administration's neglect and negligence against students of color during the course of the COVID pandemic. We are in a double pandemic, and it should be treated as such. It's not fair that we have to ask the school for empathy and equity during this time of death, of violence, and police violence. If we are failing, they are failing too. She attached a petition calling for the school board to issue a no-fail policy, issued full credit for the spring 2021 semester. The next one is from Symphony Brittle. I am the developmental advisor to Royal. It is disappointing and exhausting to see the administration continually discuss the lived realities of students of color. Some of you are new to the board and you have the opportunity to establish yourself as truly standing for anti-racist policy. The tired use of hollow, equity, and excellent policies, bureaucratic jargon, further harms students collectively advocating for the school to validate their lived experience of the double pandemic of racism and COVID-19. In their memo, the administration claims that they made significant progress towards support. This is a lie. Students are failing, and if they fail, you are failing. The administration should immediately and publicly release the demographic of failing students currently for the fall semester of 2020. They have this data and are not displaying it to you because they know what it will show. A deep racial disparity. Our high school is choosing to uphold white supremacy while taking the
I'm not doing
as a
board
parent
meetings.
of a special
Board meetings are
needs
way
and a 3-year-old, a
easier,
huge struggle for my
way
family to stay on board.
more interesting than graduation. I mean, I can't do graduation.
We lost families to COVID-19. You all know that Latinx and Black families are the hardest hit. We have to deal with deteriorating mental health.
Yeah, I could
issues
technically
and
do
both
graduation.
therapy medication. If the high school continues to remain perpetually calm, the high school refuses to see the humanity of young people in color. They do not center mental health. They center triggerness, white supremacist structures of hollow schooling that they claim are necessary to succeed in society. The high school claims to know what equity and anti-racist means, but in actuality they don't. Equity means to give students what they consider current historical discrimination and institutional racism against them. This would mean unapologetically and immensely students of color beyond their white students. Student organizers are asking for grace and empathy when they shouldn't have to. But they go to the patients with their Poems is real high school talk about the service to students who have worked diligently and persevered here. This statement in itself shows how ill-informed administration truly is on equity. How dare they shame students for having to deal with trauma and uplift those that did not have to push themselves to their limit because of the oppressive administration. It is shocking to hear administration worry about mastering skills that are largely based on white supremacist school structures, when in reality we should be mastering empathy, mental health, and this is from Jim Schwartz. Old Park River Forest High School has been numerous efforts to support students during the pandemic. These efforts have been detailed and supported documentation for clients' needs. Any requests that the school board change their policy for this year are not a reflection of the school's efforts to support students. Instead, they are a reflection of the fact that the efforts did not entirely succeed. Students were not completely supported as evidenced by what the students have shared leading up to this meeting. The administration states that it would be a theme to our core values of equity and excellence for students who are not demonstrated the requisite learning to pass on to the next level. However, it is debatable in the best of times how well grades truly capture student learning as opposed to students' efforts at completing tasks. And there is no evidence that giving the student an upgraded path will motivate them to come back and learn skills they have not yet learned. During the spring pandemic, we have experienced this past year on hopes that grades capture student learning and motivate students are even more tenuous. In addition, the administration states that we believe it would be a service to the students who have worked diligently and persevered through significant adversity to retain the gains they have earned. I strongly disagree with this conclusion. A student who worked hard during this time is rewarded with grades, with learning, not with grades. And giving grades to those students who struggled during this time take nothing away from the students who have earned passing grades. The board does not have the power under state law to exempt students from state graduation requirements. But you do have the power to temporarily change the grading policy and pass all students. I know that the administration and the board have students' best interests at heart and that you are leading during tremendously difficult times. I ask that you continue the leadership and make the hard choice of giving grades to students. This is the choice that advances equity, listening to the voices of the Black and brown students who are advocating for themselves. Please follow through on loyal demands. No student shall receive a failing grade for spring semester 2021. All students should receive credit for their correct classes. So this evening, we of course have one discussion, but it is a meeting item. And last week we met with oral this year for concerns about training for this year. And I found some of the arguments persuasive and do think that we need to investigate indicated. On May 12th, we received an email from members of Royal Revolutionary OPRF Activity. During that time, they met with myself, board president Spivey, board member Gina Harris, and Mr. Greg Johnson and Dr. Lawrence Lorenzo. Their asks include the following. Those students shall receive a failing grade for second semester 2021. All students should receive credit for their current classes second semester 2021. Students should have the option to opt out of grade-based assessment. All seniors should graduate despite their grades unless they choose to stay. In addition, we should provide students in need with a bridge cash stipend pandemic assistance with open applications. OPRF shall work with Royal as a student community partner. Royal shall be given the power to implement recommendations and hold OPRF accountable for learning through COVID-19 pandemic and U.S. racial violence pandemic. We should center and prioritize mental health and healing for the remainder of this semester and for the first semester of the 2021-22 school year. Students must gain credit by taking part in mental health and healing activities, and AD schedules should be retained for in-person classes for first semester 2021. Those are their demands tonight. Presenting our findings and open for this discussion will be joined by Mr. Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent, excuse me, Dr. Lloyd Fiorenza, Director of Student Learning, and Ms. Linda Parker, Director of Student Support. I do want to add that there was a change to one of the options that the board was given, and per the advice of our legal counsel, we would have been violating ISBE's credit requirement for graduation, and so we did remove that option. I'm probably going to turn over now to Greg, Lori, and Linda to go through our summary of time.
Okay, just to briefly go over what is in our board memo here. We have listed out a variety of different interventions and methods of support that our teachers and our support staff, administration, counselors, and so on have engaged in throughout the entire semester. In this, I won't read this point by point. I know the board and the community has this in front of them, but I do want to highlight that this ranges all the way from flexibility as far as due dates of assignments to go, and all the work that our teachers have put in to provide a quality education to our students throughout this past semester, to various types of in-person and remote tutoring that we have offered, as well as a variety of outreach mechanisms that we have put in place with our deans and a bunch of teachers and administrators throughout the school who have volunteered to reach out to students who have really struggled with both attendance and grades throughout the semester. But you can take a look at the rest of the options that are in there. Regarding the rest of the information that we have in the summary of findings, I think that as an administrative team, we've spent a lot of time discussing the requests that are in front of us, and like Sarah Spivey and Dr. Pradams alluded to, this has been an incredibly challenging and trying year for all of our students, particularly our Black and Brown students throughout the past year due to a host of factors. And we understand that without a doubt. And we have endeavored throughout the semester to provide supports to help mitigate the effects of the pandemic throughout the year. But when it comes down to it, the focus that we've had as a school district throughout the past year and all of our equity focus has really been aimed at doing our best to create a safe, comforting environment for our students, as well as to increase access to supports to the quality of learning that we have, allowing students to move forward to an additional year or through a class without demonstrating the learning, which is the real reason why we exist as an institution. It's something that is really administration and teachers and our team to really embrace. And so we really struggle with requests from that perspective. And so as a result, though, at the board's request, we have in front of us a variety of options related to course requirements, grading policies that are for the board for discussion today. Okay. And I don't know if anybody home, Lori and Linda, or Dr. Credens want to add to that somewhere. Please feel free.
I just want to add that the options that were provided to the board for consideration, one is to weigh any and all of the graduation requirements that are in addition to those required by the Illinois School Code. That references that the district has identified such as by repair as a graduation requirement, while the Illinois State Board of Education has not. The one that we took out was tied to graduation credits, period. The district does not have the legal authority to grant credit for any course that is an ISB required graduation course. And that is, we talked to legal and we heard from ISB. Last year, ISB changed certain graduation requirements due to the pandemic. This year they did not. And so ISB is not related in any of the required graduation courses. But the board does have the latitude to change the requirement on the courses that we have put into place. I do want to say that does not mean that will absolve all of the deficiencies that some students may have if that is the path that the board chooses. The board also has the right to identify the students within that group to choose to do so. That will be so then it says, students who have not completed but are completed for the definition. The other choice you have is to waive summer school. The other option you have is to waive the summer school fees. The other change that was there, it said, should a student choose not to graduate? That's not an option. That if the student has the requirement, the piece that was taken out read that a student should have the option to opt out of graduating to raise their grade. That does not change the credit. And so if the student has successfully completed his or her graduation requirements, they are deemed graduate. There's a clause in the graduation statement where we have to certify that all graduating seniors have met the requirements of the state of Illinois graduation requirements. So that was the changes to the option. The other option the board has is to leave things as they are. So I just want to be clear on the options that you have that are up for discussion tonight. And then Dr. Fiorenza or Ms. Parker has nothing to add. We are ready to go over for discussion. And this is a discussion item. Should the board choose to take action, then that action would have to take place at Thursday's regular board of education.
Questions? So would the administration consider the difference between getting credit and passing a course? Because the nuance that it's a little bit hard for me to understand.
The difference between credit and grading.
Sure. So there are two different types of credits that exist. Credit is just simply the word that is used for successful completion of a class. So on a transcript, if you've done that, regardless of what the grade is, as long as it's a passing mark, then it counts as credit. There are two different types of credits in the state of Illinois. There are those that are required by Illinois State Code, and those are locked in. Every school in the entire state has to satisfy those requirements, and you see those listed out. Each school also has another flight of requirements that are part of that as well, and those are determined by the local school board, and those are listed in the memo as well. So as students again successfully kind of pass those classes, they receive credit for those classes, and it's the accumulation of those credits that makes students eligible for graduation. Okay, that has nothing to say with what the actual grades are, just as long as they hit that threshold of passing the class. Okay, so I hope that is clear. And then the second the second question was about specifically about grading and how that differs from that. And so grading is a process that is the domain of our teachers in the classroom that they, within the spaces that they work with the students in. So that is determined by how students move towards mastery of the understanding, skills, concepts that are required for the curriculum for that class. It's determined by a variety of different types of work, both practice work and assessments, both formal and informal assessments. And teachers grade that in the grade book, and a grade comes out. So again, it's a difference between what happens within the classroom with teacher grading, and the products of that, once that's done, determine kind of behind the scenes in the school-wide system the array of credits that our students earn. Okay. So does that help to clarify those two things?
And I do want to add, when Mr. Johnson spoke to the curriculum is built around state and national standards. And so there are expectations that are national expectations of maybe probably represent core competencies. So that's what the curriculum is built around, and so that's what the assessment of the grade towards mastery are built around.
I do, and I'm just going to talk about this. So I do want to say,
Marianne, I'm in the room with you and I'm still struggling.
yes,
I have a hearing deficiency for the record. That is great.
actually, I think my light is out.
Yep, it is. Continue this like for now.
Sorry.
You can go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to just speak about my experience as a teacher last spring at UAC and what we did with grading there, just to clarify for me. I think the administration wanted to preserve faculty autonomy and expertise, and so faculty gave grades as usual. So they gave A, B, C, D, F grades. But then the university gave students the option to take courses as credit, no credit, and the student had to elect to do that. And then the university converted all D's to credit and all F's to no credit. And so my question is whether at the high school level, whether we have the option to do that kind of thing, or if that's not allowed by the regulations.
So I'll speak the last year, then Greg, if you or Linda or Lori want to speak to the NC grade and so forth. So last year, and this is for our new board members, last year, ISB waived certain graduation required courses. ISB also gave the directive that no student's grade, if they were not being successful, would fall below their highest grade for the year. We chose as a district that whatever that third quarter grade was, if it was passing, we would let that remain for the remainder of the year if the student's grade dropped. If the student grade went up, whatever the higher grade was, the student would receive. We also petitioned the board last year to waive our graduation required courses because the notion from INSA was that no students should fail last year. We did not get that guidance this year. And so we proceeded with grading as usual. We do have what's called an NC grade, or P, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we have a variety of other marks in our grade book, and actually I'll start with the grade of FX, which is if a student does not pass a specific class and retakes that class, that same class, and it could be done remotely through history and credit recovery, it could be done by re-enrolling in the class, through a variety of different paths to do so. That previous grade of an F gets FX'd, meaning it gets wiped out of the system, and the new grade completely replaces the old for the purposes of calculating GPA and have a student's current record.
Okay, that's what
Please.
does it say I take that incomplete instead, and then that was replaced by the new grade?
For the GPA, exactly right. The GPA is calculated as if that previous F did not. so that's something that automatically is in place. There's no step we have to take. Right? We have to go on. That's what happens in our year's records. And then we have a variety of other marks that are available for different purposes. And Linda might be the best person to give a full explanation of those. NC in some cases is possible, which means a course window credit. The explanation of it, I want to speak about that being put in place, during the first quarter, and due to various circumstances, and then switched over. We have some every year, even this year, right? That kind of trigger that NC as on an individual basis. And Linda, if I'm missing anything, please let me know. Please feel free to chime in.
Absolutely. Just to recognize too, the NC before the end of last school year is very rarely used. Like, this is not a mark that was in practice at our school. It's more of an administrative type decision based off of very special circumstance, which last year semester 2 ended in. I also want to just draw a parallel between where we were at the end of semester 2 last year and then how we began school this year. We were kind of shuttled into that emergency situation when all schools went to remote learning. And so that is why the state precipitated some of that waiving of classes or credit, as did we. But when we started this school year, we were very deliberate about knowing we were entering in a remote setting, and we were very intentional about making sure supports and necessary practices were put in place so that we were better prepared to receive our students in that remote environment, understanding that we were going to be grading, as Dr. Pruitt-Adams said in her remarks. We knew we were going back to a grading system, as did most high schools in our state. I don't know if any who just did the full waiver, of course, for this year. Besides that, we do have pass-fail, and pass-fail is typically something that you will see more readily used in an IEP for a student who, due to a disability, has to have a grading that's written within their IEP of a pass-fail, but also with permission from a division head, teacher, and administrator, can be something that is utilized as well for a general ed student. But that's only it's added before the marking period is over, not when you at the end of the month.
Linda, could you stay a little bit close to the mic when you sit that we can barely hear you?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. Better.
It has still have one more. This is going to be a lawyer question, so I'm sorry. I guess I still am not clear on whether this administration has, for example, the latitude to take a teacher's F and decide that that F is going to be a credit. Do you actually have that legal option or not?
No. An F with our grading scale is 0 points as written in our academic catalog on page 13. And an F cannot be made into points in a GPA or credit.
The only thing I'll add to that, though, is if there, and this may not be the answer to your question, but I'll probably answer a parallel one in some ways. There could be a discrepancy, an error, a problem. There could be something that we uncover through investigation where we realize, okay, something's changed as a result of this. Your question I took is a little bit more kind of blanket, right? And that's not an authority to exercise. No.
You did make a reference to a physical legal question.
Yeah.
So we did seek guidance from our legal counsel. And what we were told is to automatically changing all F grades to D would violate the Illinois school code. Now, they did go on to say that under section 10-20.9A, it gives the board discretion that it can establish a grading policy that does not use failing, but that would be going by incomplete or no credit. But to change a D to an F violates Illinois school code.
And the idea being that maybe they're masters of the material sufficiently or not, right? So there's definitely the skill that's used. So,
Right, section 10-20.9A indicates the decision to promote or retain students in any class shall be based on successful completion minimum attendance performance based on the assessments required under section 2-3.64A-5 of school code.
Can you go back to the part about, the board has something?
The board has the discretion to establish a grading policy that's taking a holding policy that does not use failing grade, but we can use instead an incomplete or no credit grade.
So like, for example, like Brown University doesn't give grades, right? They just give written evaluation. So, you know, an administration could maybe a vast change to do that. It could be.
It would be a policy change.
Yeah, that's, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we have within our purview to make a policy that would change the grade, but it can only be changed to an incomplete.
Is that you to change a grading policy that will do away with failing grades and instead use an incomplete or no credit. But it would be to establish a policy. Right now, our policy does not state that.
So just to make sure I'm understanding this clearly, because I think we all know where I've been on this issue for the whole year. Our only option is if we establish a grading policy as a board that would eliminate X, but the only thing that we could replace it with would be an incomplete or no credit.
That is what I was looking at. So, but the board also has the option to waive, as you said earlier, what the board has deemed as a graduation. You can waive that. You can't waive the is, and this is how it is the credit. You cannot change the D to it now. You can create an F to a D.
Hey,
So there are
Mikey.
two things that
Oh,
we
yeah.
could do. We could waive
Nothing. I'm watching this.
our
I'm
local
watching it.
graduation
Yes.
requirements. And then we could change the grading.
No, it's a
policy
webinar.
So that they would be incomplete or no
It's
credit.
called Sheila. It's a webinar. They can't hear us or they can't see us.
Policy procedure, it would not be in.
And it's just this. This is what it is.
For this time.
There's no way to say like emergency authorization, disaster
Okay.
authorization.
Okay.
Right, something like
This is exactly the information on the draft of proclamation. The reason I say that is
Oh,
last year.
okay.
under the
Yeah,
draft
thanks
of
for that.
proclamation, we were given specific
No.
directions as superintendent of what to waive and what not to waive. ISD has been clear with us this year that they are not doing that. So there is no disaster proclamation.
So I let's see what the. Let's test.
Is it green?
It's green with
Okay.
How's that? So I guess the question, I might have a series of questions, so.
That's the next type of
all
basement. Okay.
Last year. In the spring semester.
Oh, you gotta take a picture of you.
The grade drop of grade semester.
That was last school year.
That's right, that's what you, right?
Right, okay, that was for ISD side.
Right, okay. So I guess what I'm not understanding is if we're here now, graduations this weekend.
You can wear it on the 15th.
That's okay.
or
Okay, Mike, I get it. Thanks for
Yeah,
the
we have some students in there.
Well, meaning,
thing.
if that was an issue, that this was the spring, was identified, and what we actually. Okay, honestly, I mean, was there? Was there emphasis specifying that the child maybe whether it wasn't, they were previously out? Was that,
I think that's the Linda Parker question of the student support services and what Lorenza, when you talk about the steps that were taken.
well, and I just want to make sure. It is all. So, if that's what you're, they would be for. But that means put it on their hand, right? Continue on to the fall semester, say, this is. my opinion, was whole triage. Yeah, that just happened. And I find it hard to figure out
Should have used this one. Micro. I know, but you could have used this one. That's why I pulled this out.
You know, like our work, you don't have a home running, right? These kids don't have the same time to their livelihood because they go to school. And I'm really grappling the idea of having suspicion that share the same forthright or saying no outlet that we have adults make age to figure out they move forward with the struggle. I guess, yeah, I'm sure they're good for stop gaps, for support services, but you're not mentally there yet. That's irrelevant. It just is. I'm not saying you got a better solution, but I know that you're not mentally there, you don't really care, because if you don't do that, you still may be able to get what you need. Right? So that's just what I'm thinking. I'm just trying to understand if there was, we had the same logic last school year, or this school year. Especially happening now. Do we know this to be events? I guess.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, but just, the way I see this really is that I think there will be parents and students and so on who want to say the school isn't doing enough. I don't think that's the issue. I think the teachers, the administration, across the country, across the world, educators have gone above and beyond to adapt to this incredibly difficult situation, right? But I guess that's the issue. There's only so much they can do, right? Like, if there were a war, there's only so much you expect them to be able to do. And then they don't have so much, right? And we've been through a year of trauma. We've been through a year of teachers having to learn a new methodology on the fly and plan all the time again, right? And the students trying to adapt to it, and then having to readapt over and over again as things change, right? As we have information and so on. So my take on it, I don't think the question is whether education is sufficiently adhered to innovating or not. But I think, I'm thinking that I had a student in April of not this year, last year, who had already lost 4 family members to COVID. And he was, of course, a Black student. His family members were informed, right? And I think about my daughter, whose grades dropped dramatically over the last year, but she's been able to pull them up in the last few weeks. But she also has 2 parents who worked from home this entire time and could work around and help her figure it out, right? So if we, as you're feeling, to the extent that we have the power, and I just don't know, that's where I'm asking all these legal questions. To the extent that we have the power, I think we should send as much grace as possible here.
Yeah, my understand because also the terms that you before we should now are still in a pandemic.
So could have used this one.
They're staying home with their checks because they can run bills, they are.
If I could just, I'm sorry, if I could also add to, a lot of modifications were made to the running of school in order to be sensitive to the fact that we were in a pandemic. So where we're usually a 1 through 8 school day, period wise, we only did half of our periods because we were sensitive to the fact that students couldn't handle that level of intensity sitting at home dealing with all other things. So there were a lot of modifications made going into the whole running this remote so that we could alleviate whatever we could, knowing that we couldn't take away all of it, but making sure that we were doing our very best to be sensitive to the changing of conditions within people's homes, within their livelihoods, and all of that, to the extent that we could, and to still be an institution concerned with their learning as well. So
Yeah, to add, just really quickly, to add to, your statement about kind of like how we respond, I think it's a fair point. I appreciate you pointing out that, both of you pointing out that you recognize it, and I saw headline that the school has done good work, and I think our teachers really appreciate that, and it's good to hear. So thank you for throwing that out there, so that on that ground. But we have really thrown as many resources as we possibly can. And let's start just with our seniors. We have right now well over 800 students who are on pace to graduate coming later this week. And we've been tracking the progress towards graduation for those required credits by tracking what their grades are throughout the semester. As of right now, it looks like we're in the area. Today was the day that grades are due. I mean, this is how live and present this conversation is, okay? So, we have right now, it's like 34 students from this graduating class who aren't on pace to graduate at the end of this week. Some of those students, for a variety of reasons, for a host of reasons, may not have had enough credits coming into the year, right? So I mean, there are all sorts of individual situations, pre-pandemic, separate pandemic, that always go on in the year. 5 of those students, though, were scheduled to move on in our site program, for subsequent years of students. So that brings that number to 29 is the context that we have right now. And again, those are, you couldn't get any fresher, a lot of numbers for where we have. And that illustrates a little bit of kind of what we've done and how we've kind of circled around those kids. Put that in context, over 800. You're talking about this is no official stat. Graduation rates are calculated in complex ways. But you're talking about, clearly less than 5%, 4%. So the graduating class that we're talking about here, all of whom we would throw as many resources as we can during the summer to get those credits made up, to graduate with their class as class of 21 graduates. By the time we're able to bring that data to the board in early fall, late summer. So that's one bit of information. The other thing that I'll just share out, the information for our 9 through 11 students. Obviously, it's a different approach because it's a very different scenario for those kids. I want to do one little thing, context too, not a little thing, but those are 29 human beings. I mean, while I illustrate that's a small percentage of the whole, no claims about those 21 students. We certainly have work to do there as a school. Regarding our 9th through 11th graders, we are tracking that and monitoring those as heavily as we possibly can as well. That is, after all, in contrast to what we had first semester, that is the purpose of the Bridge Week that we are in right now. And Bridge Week means different things in different classes based off of the type of work, based off of the type of assessments, based off of the type of projects that students engage in. There is no cookie cutter boom. This is what Bridge Week means in all classes. And I think that's really important to point out because as a father of 2 sons in the school right now, I have seen different approaches to Bridge Week. Sometimes, in my own house, I see homework can be made up for some classes, just period, right? In other cases, it's no, there's an extra assignment or 2 we're going to give you to help prove that you understand concepts and you're obtaining mastery of this material prior to test 4. We're going to say these 2 tests, these quizzes, these major assessments, you can read, right? We're going to allow you to reassess on this thing. So there are different approaches that different classes take and based off of the nature of that class. And so that's been a cookie cutter model, but it is absolutely something that all of our teachers have engaged in. That was an expectation that we put out there. This Bridge Week is there for those types of supports. We have seen in a regular school year, and last spring is an anomaly even from this year, in a regular school year, we always see a significant increase in the number of students that we're tracking who pass classes, who, just a few weeks earlier were struggling because of these efforts in a regular school year. First semester, this past school year, we saw a huge increase as well, and we anticipate that exact same shift here because our teachers and our students are engaging to pull as much as they can out of this semester. We also, and I know you illustrated before, right? And you mentioned before that we're working, but it's good for folks to hear, I hope, that the approach that we have towards credit recovery in summer school is also one that we have expanded significantly, right, as much as we possibly can, because we know that that's a critical need. But a key last point that I want to make, right, it's a reiteration of a point I made previously. This has affected a lot of students in a variety of ways. We have leaned towards kids who are seniors to say, all right, good, let's do everything we can to get this diploma in your hand right now. And then for kids who are going to be with us, these 9 through 11 kids, we are erring on the side of the learning. We are saying the learning really, really matters. Kids are taking the next step in these courses next year. Kids are engaged in a variety of electives that they will have access to as a result of the classes that they're taking right now. And so, because we have this other year with these students, we're saying let's lean towards this learning and let's try to engage these kids in this credit recovery, maximize the access to classes next school year for these students, and keep them on pace to graduate. I mean, that is the focus. The 4-year graduation for our students is where we're going, but erring on the side of the learning for 9 through 11, and not that we didn't do that with 12, but 9 through 11 is a good scenario. Thank you.
Greg, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
It's Mark Thierry. You threw out the number of 29 students that are currently at risk of not graduating. How does that compare to the, let's say, the 5-year average before the pandemic hit?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, Linda, if you have that up right now, you might be able to speak to that. At least what I can tell you right now, Ralph, is how that compares to our last pre-pandemic year, right, in the spring of 2019. We have that right there, Linda. If you have that, otherwise, if you give me a second, Ralph, I can put it up.
You had 162 noted for the spring of last year that you were tracking, but I don't know how many ended up not actually graduating.
Yeah, I can get that for us in this
Sorry about
conversation.
that. Yeah, I don't have that up right
I think the only students who didn't graduate in the spring of 20 were those who were already behind pre-pandemic. If you're speaking to 2019, that's what they're looking at.
I'm sorry, say that again, Dr. Fredette?
I said, if he was speaking to, because he talked about the 119 that was watching last year, and he wanted to know what percentage of that class graduated. And I said the only ones who would not have graduated last year in the spring of 2020 were those who were already off track for graduation prior to the pandemic. And we even went back in with some of those kids to try to get them recoup those grades because we knew we could waive the grade from entry for last grade. Does that make sense? And so we did an extra effort to make sure that they graduate.
Yeah, I do have several questions and I might take a second turn around. The first is that I'm being a little bit disappointed that we don't have any demographic data. We really don't have a handle on the numbers.
Yeah.
There should be, and I know there was a report for semester, but we should see third quarter grades and how that breaks down along racial lines, along lines of classes. Are there certain classes that kids are failing are more apt to fail, or certain demographic kids that are struggling in different classes? Brown kids struggling more in math or in English, and black kids in math. The white kids in history. I think that needs to be looked at. We have 29 kids. I think that the urgent need in my mind is graduation. Because it's Saturday. 29 is not an unmanageable number to look at to see what their issues are. The 29 of these 29 kids, something can happen where whether it's a sweeping of a class, and they can get their graduation. So my question
question is, with these 29 classes, can we drill, 29 kids, can we drill down individually, find out where they're at? Now, there may be some that are failing classes, history classes, that we can't do anything about. Alright. But it also, may be that there is something we can do. And, you know, we can also look at the causes, you know, of these 29 kids, you know. You know, one child may have, it had substantial, effects from COVID, where they had family members, they had et cetera. So I think that, I mean, 29 is not nearly the number that I thought. Okay. And the other question that I would have is, you know, I like the idea of incomplete. Okay. And a grace period. I don't know what we can do there, and that would be not just for seniors, but for other students as well. You know, everybody knows I work directly with kids. The last week I sat and do study tables with students, monitoring them. And I know the struggles that they've had. And I've talked to some of the parents. And I know that especially early on, there were issues, and there could be equity issues. And we're not hearing about the equity portion of this. Okay. Surprised Bob isn't here to speak a little bit. You know, there were some that got behind because they didn't have proper internet until they got their hotspot. And, you know, once you get behind, it's a snowball rolling downhill for kids. Once they get behind, and then they get frustrated, and then they give up. You know, and also there's, you know, some inaccuracy sometimes in the absences because internet wasn't working right or was down for a short period of time. Those kind of things. So I think those issues should be, you know, we need to look at this. I mean, I know we have to do a post-mortem and hopefully we're coming to an end. And I know it's not going to be a turn on the faucet. It's going to be a glide path. And I've said that before. It's not going to be a crash on. But I would like to know is, because I know it's happened in colleges, is it possible for a kid, one of these 29 kids, if he needs to do his credit recovery over the summer, can he walk in our ceremony? And not get a diploma and not be graduated until, actually technically graduated until end of summer, I think, sometime, correctly. You know, and then also, what can we do in terms of, quote, incompletes and grace period?
Can I just, everybody raised a question, so I'll just note, having given some of them, we can really try not to, because odds are the student will not come back and finish, right?
Correct.
So be aware of that, is that, you know, I would say I probably, you know, given the students the option of incomplete, I'd say 25% of the time they actually turn out. Which is not to say not to do it, I just
this might be a different circumstance.
yeah.
If I could just give some insight. Oh, go ahead.
And then give me 1 second, and I answered Ralph's question earlier.
Yep.
The fall of the spring of 2019, there were 62 students who were in that situation that have, compared to the 29 we said earlier. And I will say that the spring of 2019 led to a graduation rate for us of 91%, which over the past 5 years, that's the lowest graduation rate that we've had. 91%. So 62 was probably right about the high end of what we had throughout that 5-year span, and so that was
Greg, if I could just follow up quickly on that, because I appreciate that. Linda, you really do need to talk because you have more valuable information than my question. So I'm sorry for cutting you off. But I just want to get to the significance of that, Greg. So I'm assuming, you know, Fred raised a number of issues. I'm assuming those are precisely the kind of issues someone on your team tracks with the different kids when you've identified a kid that is potentially in danger of not graduating for whatever reason. And I'm assuming that's when you start implementing, the old word was responsible intervention, but whatever the new word is, to try to work with the student, get them to a point where they will satisfy enough of the requisites that they can graduate, right? So am I right about that assumption that is exactly those are exactly the kind of issues you try to suss out and then identify supports to assist the student with? Or am I wrong?
Yes, yes, and 9 through 12 too.
Right. So that being the case, and Fred having raised a number of good issues, it's nice to know that you focused on those kinds of things. It's never okay to have one kid who doesn't graduate in a class. I mean, I'm sure that's all our standard is perfection. Whenever you have people involved in any process, my understanding is you never get to perfection. Do you feel like the lower number of students potentially not being able to graduate this year is a positive reflection of the supports you put in place? And that's why I kind of want to know the 5-year average. And how would you evaluate these supports given what you know about prior graduation rates and this unique circumstance we're working through now?
From my level of perspective, I'm proud of the efforts that we made, but Linda and her team are a lot closer to it than I am, and I'm going to let her speak to that question.
I think also when we look at the number of Fs and number of students, keep in mind that every F that's earned is not necessarily a graduation requirement. So unfortunately, with senioritis being what it can be in even past years, students will sometimes make the decision, I don't need that course, and not spend the time getting supports and getting the putting the work into it in order for those Fs to go down. But that does not mean that it prohibited all of those students from graduating from that number of the 62. So, and then of course that number also encompasses students who remain with us for different reasons based off of their setting within our building. But I definitely think that what you're seeing this year in terms of the low number that Greg did report has to do with all of the supports that were in place that students took advantage of, the teachers making outreach to students and making themselves available through office hours and various tutoring opportunities, taking advantage of times when supports were available within the building or remotely, contributed to what you see this year. And 29 is really, out of a class as large as ours, is very, very small. Of course, perfection being what we're always reaching for, we're always still trying to grab the few. And I know from looking at grades that they were coming in today that it's a myriad of reasons. In some cases, it may be a class that a student still needed to finish and get an average higher, and it could be multiple credits, as we see happen each year with students as we go through. So
I just want to jump in. I'm sorry for the echo. I just want to jump in. Mr. Martiri brought up RTI. And so I think a few people have asked the question about how did we use the data from last year to drive what we've done this year. And that is the MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support model. So we did pull data from that spring semester, and we did use that information to put students into in-school credit recovery. We did use that data and part of the first semester to midterm data to direct students to the connectivity option, where students who were having trouble, not just with technology connection, but with engagement connection, to invite them into that opportunity. And that was primarily our Black and Brown students. And we did see improvement in grades. We did see improvement in engagement and attendance from that very small group of students, we did see that impact, as well as we used that data as well as this current year data to invite 300 students to take an opportunity with content area tutoring with one of our teachers. And we worked very diligently to try to get a teacher that student had. So our teachers provided a lot of one-on-one or small groups, so less than 5 kids, support to any student that wanted or would participate in that support. And I feel like in cooperation, which is what MTSS is, right? It's layers of support, not just one thing. So in addition to all of the academic opportunities, virtual tutoring, connectivity, content tutoring, teacher office hours, we had all of the SEL and emotional supports, the attendance initiative that the Student Services Department took on, as well as our partnership with the Regional Office of Education, where 74 kids had an advocate, one of 2 advocates that personally connected with them, encouraged them to go back to school, encouraged them to engage with their teachers, brought them food, hotspots, whatever was needed. So I think, again, the list of things that we have attempted to provide based on data, based on need, is also part of the reason that we see a lower number. And I think a lot of work by so many people at the school to just layer that support on our students.
I think it's actually laudable and acceptable.
Do you have any process, evaluative process for determining effectiveness of your interventions on different cohorts of students?
So we do. What I will say is last year was my first year here, and we brought the MTSS process forward and made some significant changes, aligned our interventions, and initiated multiple new interventions just this year. So as I believe it was linked in this presentation or in the memo, correct, Greg?
Yes, yeah, just the list of interventions plus those.
Right, so we have an evaluation process. I just want to be transparent. This year, we did not follow that evaluation process because we don't believe this is a good benchmark year. We were in the middle of a pandemic. These were brand new interventions that we were trying. So what I have for you is updates on some highlights, some key data. The demographics is in there. However, a true evaluation with metrics and indicators of success is not as tight as it would have been in a non-pandemic year. So we will do that moving forward. Absolutely.
I do want to add that coming up soon, there will be an MTSS report on academics.
Yeah, I don't think that's focused primarily tonight, just in the interest of our seniors who are graduating in like 3 days, to make sure that we are able to kind of reach a point of having our evaluation process Thursday. So if I know the administration will come forward probably in the fall with all of the data and all of the things. But so for tonight, we could just focus a little bit more narrowly. You have not had a chance to.
Could I?
I'll wait for some business. That's okay. They do it around. Yeah, I know. I know who else is something. So I'll wait.
And I was just going to say too, and when you have a chance to, I would like to answer Mr. Ark's question about the incomplete.
Let's just make it every time that.
I would allow Linda to answer just to keep the flow good. I can sit for a second.
Just thank you. Just very quickly, the incomplete tends to happen as like a stopgap. If you can imagine that incomplete, as written in our catalog, gives the student 9 weeks in the next semester to complete what's necessary to resolve that grade into what we always hope is a passing grade. But from what we know from when we ended last semester 2 of last year, without a plan, a viable plan for students with incomplete, someone has to follow up with students to make sure that work gets completed so that they can work to a resolution on the grade. So imagine that it wouldn't be until about October of the new school year that the students would be turning in work to try to complete the grade from this semester that we're ending right now. That's on top of the new work that they're receiving coming back from a pandemic into the school year. So it's not as simple as it may sound, just because they don't have any instruction that's supporting those efforts to get work completed and turned into their last year teacher while keeping up with the work they're doing for the current school year. So in the past, incompletes have been used on a very small level, and teachers usually craft things with individual students and offer that grade versus it being a mass incomplete to try to not fail students.
Sure. So I appreciate all the efforts being put forth in terms of trying to help our students. We know these are not normal times. There is feedback that it's not working for everyone, and I think we know that's the case, and we hear that. Like Fred, I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have data. I recognize that if the grades are just coming in today, then, you know, how real time do we need to be? But I think there's a value in some cases for historical data, just to put things in perspective, because without that, we're, you know, what does 29 mean? It means a lot of different things depending on what the context is. So I think we've kind of made some headway in my mind in that area. You know, in the data category, one question I have is, do we see any data that shows the mode of instruction? And I'm really referring to the hybrid versus the remote, and that indicates any gap between those two. And it might be other dynamics that do that, but are we seeing that? And the reason I'm asking that is, you know, one of the recommendations relates to summer school, which, you know, I mean, to me, if students are remote and they're not being successful, and we're asking them to continue and do summer school remote, are we kind of asking ourselves, we're not really positioning ourselves and our students in the best place. So I would like to, that would be one question I have is, do we see anything related to the mode of instruction? What I mean by hybrid versus in-person versus remote. I appreciate, Greg, the way you broke it down into, I know, two buckets, which is you know, the seniors and then the underclassmen, because there are two different solutions, and I believe the effort to focus on the seniors is
Come on.
what is needed, and you know, Fred's comment about it's looking at each individual student. I think as we look at the 9th through 11th, in your comment about really focusing on learning, that's where I'm at. I mean, to me, I'm not, you know, to waive and lower the bar, whatever. I want to assure that that our students have the opportunity to learn and do everything we can to help them learn in what has been unprecedented, challenging times. So any solution I have would be aimed at that, and I will yield the floor.
So I want to start by saying, as a person who is part of a multi-tiered system of support, I am so clear that the MTSS system works and does its job, and also aware of how things can, students also having that completely in place, students still could not be able to achieve during the pandemic when they're traumatized. My concern is that, okay, I have a question about the 29, because there's something that you said, Brenda and Claudia, about the 29. Is it possible possible for those 29 to graduate if they complete summer school, all 29 of them? Or is there just a smaller group subset?
Great question. There are, actually, I probably need a tighter analysis than what I have in front of me. It is split, I believe.
It is. Yes, it is
Is that-
split.
I
There
don't
are
know
some-
where it's split, yeah.
Yeah, there are some students who may need 1 or 2 credits, but there are also some students who were significantly behind already, as we've had in past years, so they would not be able to complete over the summer.
So the students that are significantly behind, removing them because they would have been behind pre-pandemic?
Correct.
So removing those students, I am concerned that we don't have an evaluative way to determine the level of trauma a student may have experienced that would prevent them from completing schoolwork. As I've said, this whole school year, we're in a pandemic and people are not functioning. And like as adults, we know what pandemic brain is when we're trying to teach or lead or do any of the things that we're doing. And our own functional level has been minimized because of this on a daily basis. Now you're talking about long term. But there's no, we don't, if we can't find a way to support our students without trying to quantify how much trauma or upset or harm that they've tried to endure in this past year because of the dual pandemic, then I'm concerned that we're trying to quantify something that's not quantifiable. And so as we're having this discussion, all that keeps coming up for me is, what can we actually do? What we can actually do, as you said in the beginning, Dr. Adams, was what we can actually do is we can have a policy, but even if we change that policy, that's not going to affect these students right now.
If you change the grading policy, if you develop a new policy,
Yeah,
that does away with failing, period. That means moving forward, not just this time.
right.
That, if we go through the policy process, it won't be done in time to do what needs to happen on Saturday. That's what I was saying.
Okay, so what can we do for this group of 29 students who we do not have the ability, as far as from my perspective, we do not have the ability to determine their reasoning for lack of success. The MTS system aside, I do understand that you have an MTS system that has probably communicated with families, and some of them you may be able to identify. But there may be students who absolutely did not show up at all because they did not have the ability to do that because they have been experiencing trauma that we don't understand.
If the board chooses to waive the board graduation credit requirement, that does not mean that all 29 students will still graduate, because they could be lacking in the required graduation credit. And I want to say that because whatever the board decides at the end of the day may not still do exactly what you want to do if it's all standard.
How do we find that out? How do we find out?
Normally, what we did last year, and I don't know if that's been done this year, Linda can answer that, but what they did last year was look at where every student was at that point in time. And when Izzy said we will waive these courses, they actually went back and worked with kids on those deficits that they had pre-pandemic. So there's a way of looking through that analysis that they said Mr. Arkin mentioned about looking at what kids have. You can look at the grades and tell that there's a required class for us, a required class for Izzy. On elective, you can tell that. So that's an option, but I don't know where that will land, is all I'm saying.
Right, that's what, I'm just curious, if we know which students we could waive and how many that would graduate? Is that an option to find out?
There is no doubt that we can take a look at the kids that we're talking about here. Which are the classes they've taken fall within this board's jurisdiction for graduation requirements, and get a subset of that 29 that would be affected this way. And I know I want to clarify one thing, which I don't think was a direct statement, or people said that, you know, I feel just, I want to continually give these folks who do work, right? Because they work their tails off. And so I know what our Linda has led the team to do is there's a spreadsheet that she has, and she's working with the PSS team to craft, they've asked them to put their narratives in, like, what do we know about these kids throughout the semester that we can do? And she shared that with me. I'm tempted to kind of illustrate it, but that would be identifiable. It would be part of what I'm to do. But I just want to illustrate that we are not only having those invitations, those conversations individually, but we are looking at the net effect of that stuff systemically when we're looking at all in one place. But we're still not touching everybody. I mean, we know it's not perfect, you know?
Well, the idea that those 29 students have had outreach through the MTSS system is absolutely true.
Absolutely.
But I do want to say, in conjunction with what Greg is saying, the efforts that we're taking did not just start now. There have been many years, Greg will attest to, that the night before graduation, we are on the phone talking about what individual kids need to graduate. There was one graduation, we sent somebody to a homeowner kid that never come on. So I don't want you to think that we just stop when we get the list. We don't.
Correct.
We continually, with Linda's group, the counselors, the social workers, even the teachers are continuously trying to see what can be done. The 29, as they said, grades are coming into that.
You know, and I also feel a little bit of realism out there just because of where we are timeline-wise. Our graduation program, it needs to be good, right? And so that's today's deadline is what it is. 3 o'clock today, right? To get the compiling information, we have to send that into the clinic. And so just so we have, so whatever actions we may or may not take, that document is what it is. I just want to make that clear.
So I will add to that though too.
If I could just plant a seed as well. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, when we find a kid at that last minute, we then go back to print program
For that individual.
And so, Linda?
I was just gonna plant a seed as well, just to what Gina Harris was saying and what you just said, Dr. Pruitt Adams, was this year, the pandemic is the trauma that we know, but every year there is something that is impacting a group of our students that always is going to need attention. And so this year we know about the pandemic, so it's in front of us. And so that's what we want to address. But some students actually thrived in this situation because they learn better this way. There are some students, our traditional learning environment is very prohibitive for them. And so the number just changes in terms of how the trauma, or what the trauma is, and we just may not know that. But every year we could have this conversation about who is being impacted by trauma that is affecting their academic performance. So it's something to just keep in mind.
We created a trauma. There was a position now that we didn't have before as part of your PSS system that is also an additional support for, right? So
Correct.
So I applaud the work that's been done. I'm not saying that is not the case. So please do not take this the wrong way. But just as I've said all year, I just want to reiterate, it's a pandemic. These are extenuating circumstances, and I understand ISB's piece is what it is, but what we can do, I feel we need to do. So and to piggyback on from Gina's point, I would like for us to kind of begin honing in on some action items and developing a plan for how we want to approach them so that we can actually get to that point before this. So that we know what we're gonna roll out, right? So as people are sort of like giving a comment, thank you, Gina. If we could kind of articulate where we're landing, that would be helpful.
Well, it seems to me we only have one option, because we've changed it very possible. In fact, this group of students this fast is we need to wait. Non-disciplinary requirements correct to that, but I don't understand it. The only option we have to be any kind of effect for this current graduate class of students would be waiving history requirements, non-history requirements, graduation, correct?
That's right.
So, regardless of the data shows, that's what we do legally, correct?
Well, I'm not sure.
I'm going based on what the data can give. So, whether that's true or not, I just want to make sure that's what we presented.
We also have the option of waiving some school fees for those students who, but they can't. Any student who is not successful has the latitude to appeal.
For every class, in other words.
Well, there's only so many classes.
Exactly, that's
not sure, I know exactly what the summer school quiz is, how many?
Well, I guess, well, if they pass certain, that's not offered, they didn't pass it now, and the capacity to pass it now in the summer is not a solution, right?
Yes, however, there are two different types of ways students can engage in summer school. One is through kind of what I think your question applies, a traditional class, you know, which would be remote, as Tom pointed out. But still would be a traditional class in the sense that it's 25 kids, one teacher, and so on and so forth. We also have a credit recovery model that uses a program called Edgenuity. It's a computer-based Edgenuity model where the standards in those classes that are online are aligned to their appropriate class within the school, and kids can take that class, take multiple classes during the summer for that credit recovery purpose. And we've kind of streamlined that whole process to make it a little bit more accessible to our kids during the summer for how we're handling the pre-assessments within it. So it's not as clean as you think. Like, okay, well, in regular summer school, you got 3 times during the day where you take class, the maximum class you can take in the summer school, 3. Not true. With the Edgenuity, you know, double is possible, or even more than that in some situations, depending on where kids are.
So one last on question in all areas. So we can do 2 things. We could waive the not your requirements, and then waive yourself.
So I guess I'm just trying to add, maybe it's action items at the end of this, but at the beginning of it, you know, I've been giving grades for 25 years now, and I've been questioning the academic grading system every semester of those 25 years, right? So, and you know, at Chicago is not the same as at University of Illinois or Roosevelt or Salt Lake State Community College. Speaking of 4 places I've taught, they're like very different, right? And so, I guess I think we need to decouple that a little bit. I've heard 3 separate issues tonight. So one is this question of how teachers and admin worked hard to add in additional support for students during the pandemic to help as much as possible. Obviously, yes, they worked incredibly hard to accomplish a tremendous amount, but nonetheless, some students are clearly still seeing effects specifically from the pandemic. And I really want to acknowledge what you say, Linda, about every year there are individual students who are experiencing trauma. I think that's incredibly important for us to keep in mind. But I think this year is exceptional because the teachers are drowning, the admin is drowning, like the entire system is under additional stress, right? So I guess I would make an argument that these are exceptional circumstances. That if we do something this spring, it doesn't necessarily set precedent for every year after. We would have to come back and consider that. The second point was the sophomore junior students. Are they learning what they need in order to be prepared for the next level of class at our high school? And I think that's the standards, readiness indicator, motivational tool aspect of grading. And so I admit I'm still not thrilled about giving Fs to even the sophomores and juniors, given the pandemic. But as I say, there is some room to make things up, and I can see the argument there. And then what we can actually do to choose for our failing seniors. I don't want to lose what Fred suggested about giving the option of letting seniors walk at graduation without actually receiving a diploma if they haven't fulfilled requirements. I don't know, maybe the school has never done it. I don't know if high schools do that, colleges do. So I don't know if it's possible.
We do have some students that mostly due to IEP who get a certificate of attendance. I also want to add that under the scope of grading, we realize that we need to revisit grading. And we've not really said that in this room to the point we announced maybe 3 months ago that we will be forming a committee consisting of teachers, parents, administration, and stakeholders to really look at grading practices and what needs to happen as we go forward with grading. What I'm going to say now may not sit well with people in this room, but I feel the need that I have to say this. In this district, I have my integrity question also. There is a statement in graduation that says that every student walking across that day, I have to say that the board that you cannot, you should not do anything. Our job as administration is to present to you the legal aspect of what is doable, the non-legal pieces that go to that. And I think you all know we have done what we believe is in the best interest of our students. At the end of the day, whatever decision you decide, we will do that. But I can't retire from 44 years and my last statement publicly not be a true statement. And then maybe people will question whether or not I've been true or transparent in the 5 years I've been here. But I think people who know me know that my integrity is applied to me. And so I would not be able to say that statement. And I have to say to you that is that fair to those who have met that requirement. I just need to say that. If someone else chooses to make that statement and certify the class, I'm okay with that too. But I cannot.
If there's
Just say walk.
Yeah, and I honestly don't know what the situation is at colleges, like in terms of whether I can make that kind of statement or I just don't. I don't.
If you waive the credit or district credit, and that gives a kid to walk, that's different. But to just walk and say that is just not true. I have to say that.
And then just the two things that we have about taking classes, reading some instruction. Again, my last question is it still, I'm sorry, I feel like you answered this, but I'm still confused. Yeah, is it possible to convert any remaining senior Fs to no credit, which doesn't fix their graduation issue, but it would look better on a college application, it would not drag down their GPA as much, and I wonder whether that's a reasonable pandemic response. So that's my last question.
So I think two answers to that. Is it possible? Yes, but I want to clarify what I said earlier about the FX.
Yeah.
Right, because, and you highlight in your question there, the value of GPA. And the purpose of the FX is to avoid exactly what you were illustrating with the government, right? So it takes that F5 calculation and the new grade completely replaces it as if the previous one never existed.
But that doesn't assume the student comes back and does the work to fix it, right?
Absolutely.
Right, whereas I think it's a different situation. Changing Fs to NCs in which they then go on and it's just an NC on their transcript, right? And so
you're exactly right about that.
So
you're exactly right.
Can I just clarify, does NC then mean, but that's no credit, so they're still not getting credits and they still would not graduate. They still would not.
It doesn't fix the graduation problem, but
I just didn't try to sit there. I think
It would address that problem for the rest of the stuff.
Well, the other piece too is for Gina's question, it wouldn't fix it if that was a requirement, right? And they would get no credit, but if it's not a requirement, they can get no credit and still graduate.
Yes. You know, what you said is right. So NC doesn't allow it. Yeah. It's only the same thing else. What you said is exactly right.
I have a question now. With the NC, there's a certain number of credits that are required to graduate.
Correct.
So there's a double-edged sword. That if a person needs 3 credits to graduate, and it's not a required course, and we say, we'll give you an NC, aren't they still short 3 credits?
Well, there are two ways. I explained this before. Your question gets right at it. There are 2 ways that it matters. There's the overall credits you need to graduate, which is a number, right? A maximum number that you have to, or I should say a minimum number that you have to get. And then there is each required course that you have to get. So in the 3-class scenario that you're talking about, if you need all 3 to hit the minimum, then regardless of what they are, you got to pass all those 3. It's possible that 2 of those 3 are specifically listed as required courses. Another one could just be an at-large elective to issue to that child. So yes, that's the stress.
And just to clarify, so I know that question is not about graduation stuff. It's because it matters for GPA. To give an example, like fall quarter freshman year, I flunked calculus. If I realized I was flunking, I should have withdrawn earlier, right? And then I wouldn't have the FI transferred to my overall GPA would have been higher, and I would have had a better shot at grad school. So I thought, right, and so it's separate from the graduation question. It's just a question of looking at the Fs. Do we want to consider changing them? And is that beneficial then for our department?
Is it official for
Yeah,
everybody?
it's beneficial.
Oh, beneficial, I'm sorry.
Beneficial then for our department.
Only in a transcript way. If I am a sophomore freshman, I'm taking a lot of classes that are required. I'd still have to take them again, but you would be sheltering my transcript. GPA wise.
Yeah, credit, that's the difference, right? The NC takes care of the moment.
Yeah.
The credits take care of it before it even starts to take the moment, yeah.
Yeah, a little quick question, when talking about waiving, our district required courses, if we were to look at these 29, can we do that on an individual basis or a group of students, or do we have to do it globally for all students?
That is a question that we examined last year, almost exactly 12 months ago. And the answer is it's possible to do it for, well, what we concluded at that point, but I didn't share out, that it was possible to do for a group, meaning a graduating class, right? Not a subgroup of that class, but for that graduating class. And that would not necessarily have any bearing on any other class of the students that you're on, okay?
And then I wanted to make a comment, that the pandemic has had a tremendous effect on everything. I know I have suffered myself. I am a salesperson, and my thing is to go out and meet people, and go see customers and service my customers. And I've had to do that over Zoom for a year, and I get the stress is a little different, I know, from other people. But what I'm saying is there's a continuum or gradient of
Your cert is
trauma
expired.
and anxiety, or however the effect is. So one of my concerns is that, yes, I know the pandemic is disproportionately affected, all right, and along with, some of the racial violence is disproportionately affected our Black and brown students. But it also has affected other students, and it may have affected some of those minority students who are not necessarily failing. Okay, so an A student may be getting a C, all right, and not failing. So I just wanted to make that comment that, in talking about this MC, all right, and talking about grace periods and credit recovery and summer school, all this kind of thing, that, there are other students that have some deficiencies as well. I think all of our students, yes, I mean, I think it was Linda who said that some students learn in this remote environment, they thrive, they're doing well. And I get that, but I just want to make sure that we all keep in mind that there has been some effect, on all students as well. And I think that, especially as we start to talk about what kind of remediations are available to our 9 to 11 students. Okay, so we really need to keep that in mind as well.
And we will be presenting to the board in June, the plan to reopen it long as today, and then, tied to our ESSER fund, that does just that. Steps the district will put in place to address learning loss and intersection on social emotional learning as well. What the district will do for
me ask a question about, ISPA, how much do they charge for that in summer school per course?
Yeah.
Okay.
I tried to pull it up.
It might be 250. I can't remember, Greg. You might have to look. I thought it might be.
That's per class, and that's-
It's per class and, yes, I believe it's 250. I'm gonna double check on that right now.
Okay, so I'm trying to think through our options. So I think one option is to offer students, I don't know, again, that's you have to just do it, I don't know that it'd be something to offer, but, convert apps for second semester to no credit. That would give our seniors who didn't need those credits, not much, frankly, like, I don't know, it's really good for them. But for students from 9 to 11, it gives them an opportunity to not have it go into their GPA. They might have to take additional courses to make up those credits. I think that's an option. I think an option is to waive local credit requirements, right? So some subset of the finance students very well might be able to block, who might, provided they have a certain number of courses and all that is credit side. And then I think we also have some future budget for summer school, right? I mean, sort of philosophically, it's just summer school should be free because they're public institutions. So that's sort of like I'm on the far end of the spectrum. But I certainly would have some strong feelings about the idea around is free and always, free, right? Because there's not the whole point that we want students to be able to like learn and improve it. But I would strongly suggest that we do it at the very least for this summer for students who are trying to recover credit from this past school year. So I think those are our three options. If there are more, please let me know.
Yep, and financial question, $100 for one ISPA course. 2 or more is $200. It does not go up after that.
Hey, bye.
And that's compared to the previous figure we threw out.
Bye.
These are regular summer school course.
So are we talking about, you can do all three ways of pay? You do all three
Oh,
options.
yeah, right, combination, right. So
Waive local credit.
local credit for seniors, right, not for all students looking at that at least, but for seniors for this year, so that some subset of those students would hopefully be able to walk on Saturday. And the weather was nice, so hopefully it's Saturday. For students, so that no one's GPA is. Yeah, you have some benefit, especially to our younger students, no credit for X. Or yes, or we would be, credit for seniors, but I just don't know what that gets them, right? Because you would, if you graduate, right? I don't know that enough, you can make that credit really helps them, it's actually considered as a credit, like they consider graduated with a GPA or whatever. So anyway, and then stations that we have, if others have additional ones they want to, that I have not enumerated or. I have a question. Is it possible for us to find out how many?
Absolutely. We didn't have it by this time tomorrow, we just have to track it. But I don't have it right now.
That's because I want to clarify. When you say no credit, and I said no credit for any, my question is that no credit for any student, this is whatever you're saying. Because I think you're talking seniors, right? I'm actually talking the whole, the grades for the other students, their last day is Thursday. So we will count the grades for freshman, sophomore, junior.
Friday is when those post.
By the end of the day, Friday, that's right.
So we don't have that yet to know.
Yeah, those teachers are gonna need that time.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, and that's what we have a lot of time.
So say this for, that's what we're talking, Captain. You were proposing no credit for any student who receives an F. Second semester only.
I think for the board, I don't know. I personally don't want to see our students penalized, because I think it's like so out of control, right? Nobody brought this on us. So I would love to see a way that we can have students not be penalized for this year that's been difficult. And also encourage students to continue to learn, but I think that is what matters, in terms of an education. So that the no credit sort of gives them extra incentive course or to complete the course so that they get that NC off and then actually replace it with a letter grade. So I don't know, that's sort of what I kind of want to hold harmless somehow, measure for students so far as we can for this year.
I agree, Sarah, and I, like the idea of the full year.
And
I
just,
know what the measure for FTEs though too, right? So there's like a whole operational piece that's, I
And we're looking to consequences for administrative aspects. I don't
a
know.
whole lot of people are thinking fabulous, probably, I don't know.
just one remark, NC grades don't get replaced on the transcript. So they are not against the GPA, but they stay there for good. They don't get FX.
Would that be the FX grade?
Correct, but an FX comes from leaving the F there and it turns to an FX when it's retaken. If you do an NC, it just stays NC and it'll always be on the transcript that's just taken one time and no credit.
But to clarify, neither the NC nor the FX is calculated in the GPA. That might be clear, but it's worth saying.
And also, neither, unless they retake a course, they're not going to get that credit that's required either, that is correct.
Correct.
So either one of them.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, the credit, no credit means you didn't get credit for that class. That's when you took it. It doesn't mean that credit is waived for it.
Yes.
Correct. And are we saying NC for just the ones we can waive, or are we saying NC for F across the board?
Yeah.
I would do an in-person score.
Well, no, you mean, to Ms. Parker's question, you mean NCs for across the board that we cannot waive can we NC the ISB requirements? We cannot.
I don't think so. That's why I was asking. I don't think we can do.
So you're asking about the ones we can NC for the whole. I thought.
You know what, actually, right there, let me clarify that. So think of, and the earlier conversation, the discrepancy between, or the distinction between what a credit is versus a grade. NC, consider that as a grade, okay? That just means that, you're getting this NC for your grade, rather than an A, B, C, or D, which means you pass the class with various levels of proficiency. The NC simply means you took the course, you did not get credit for it, period. All right, but that could happen. An NC could be on a kid's transcript for any graduation requirements, regardless of whether it comes from the state board, regardless of whether it's our local one. Has nothing to do with it because that's a grade. All right. Now, yeah. So does that help you? Because the first, yeah, okay.
So then we could potentially waive, if you do an NC, what grade, if you do it, so if this is required course for graduation, right? If I'm a junior, and it's a course I think that's my junior year, and you give them an NC, they can make it up to a senior year to retake that course. Now, however, if I am a senior, and it is an NC required course, and you do an NC, I am still short the credits needed. The NC becomes my grade, but I still don't get the credit. So I still, if I need that to graduate.
And I would advise a universal application of ENC because of the varying effects that could have on the student because of the FX being available. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the NC means as Linda was saying, the NC is permanently there. Once it's there, that's on the transcript as a mark of NC. FX. No, a new grade is going in.
So what is that, right? Can we decide that an NC can be replaceable as well? Is that, who decides that?
That was my question.
Why can't we say that an NC can be replaced by an A if the student takes the course and does well? Who's the decider of an NC requirement?
That's our standing practice. That's what the policy is, but there's nothing beyond this school that determines how that's applied. Okay.
And I would just keep in mind, like this, we're talking about in this context, but remember a precedent gets set. So NCs in 10 years that aren't related to a pandemic, whatever you set into place now gets carried into the future. So
Could we stipulate that that would now be the case, that this is extenuating circumstances because we're in a pandemic now, and this was the school year of the pandemic?
well, only, but if we change it as policy, like when we said going forward, changing something as policy, then that just gets set in the record, kind of how we have access to the FX. It's part of policy, so it gets applied now in
We
cases.
could change it for just a temporary period. of time.
You can set the term, it's, the policy is for this time period.
Yeah, I have a quick question about this. It won't be available for 9 to 11, as early as on Friday,
The
right?
final data, that's correct.
Can we do this in tiers? Where we get seniors because they're graduating, and then wait for the next one, to they will be up and make a decision, but for 9 to 11.
So one thing on that, I think, has to do with summer school, right? Is there anything that we decide, that or that we choose not to decide, going to somehow affect what course of students who take in summer school for 9 to 11? I don't know the answer to that, but that's.
Summer school will have already started, but just barely by the time. Well, and the cow is June 10, so that's look at that discussion. So yes, and that would be well in to the summer school period. So they're coming forward.
So I would like to ask the administration to consider the things that we've discussed, right, our various options as we believe we have them, and maybe present to us what the operational realities would be of the approach. I feel like it's a rationale that also don't have to with that, right? Everybody needs to see them because the reality is we have a budget, we have a certain number of teachers, we have a certain number of hospitals, and we have operations. I want to make sure that we're not having a bunch of unintended consequences here, like courses that we can't offer because we don't have enough teachers to teach them, for example.
I think I need to maybe have this down. The list of exactly what we're talking about. I'm not sure if I have that.
The request, the consideration, and I am going to ask for a very clear board direction before we leave this meeting. Yes. Because I do not want to come back and be told that is not what we asked for. So right now I have consideration to waive local credit for seniors only. Graduation required credit for seniors only. I have waived summer school fees, especially district for summer 21. I have no credit for any F course. And I'm not sure if you landed on the NC. I mean, no credit, if you landed on the NC for that. And I think the direction was for.
No, that is, I mean, I was proposing converting any Fs to NC for the 2021 school year.
And with the provision that the MC is immutable, and they can choose to take the course over and replace that MC at a later date.
Yes, no, if we do the NC, it'd be a slight shift to how we apply it.
And we can say this is at least right now, this is a one-time pandemic.
And we want to get I heard entire school year not going to much.
Yeah, I don't know why we arbitrarily say spring and fall apart. People.
Okay, they got those going.
Right, and Sarah, as far as the budgetary impact goes of waiving summer school fees, that's a one-time cost. It shouldn't be an outrageous cost. If there's anything we could use fund balance for as a one-time basis in response to the pandemic, it's waiving the coursework fees for this summer. And it's not going to be a major drain on those reserves. So I don't think we have any budgetary that I'd be concerned about. And I do think that'd be an appropriate utilization
reserves.
Thanks, Sean. One thing we also could look at in addition to that, the school ESSER three funds potential for that, as you know, it's designed to address and encourage mitigation of learning loss.
And that's the potential, I believe, for our ESSER fund.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I do have one more question in. There's, you talked about the domino effect. So we, just, I guess, a great question. Families are paying the fees for summer school already, those who are enrolled.
Yes.
Yes, vast majority. We will have some folks who enroll in specifically credit recovery based off what happened in the next several days, what has happened in the past few days.
My question is, if we are now waiving summer school fees, we need to reimburse those parents their fees. That's what we're all clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be appropriate, Doug.
Okay, I just.
I understand. Tom, I want to make sure that you had a chance to give your opinion as to these.
No, that's fine. I think, the three issues, I'm not clear on two of them at this point, and hopefully, one was just the point raised. When we say waiving summer school, is it just for credit recovery, or is it waiving all summer school?
What I wrote down was waive summer school fees, especially ESSER, which is credit recovery, for summer 2021.
And you know what, I'll add to that conversation just as additional context pieces. 3 years ago, when Jason Lee first started as the summer school coordinator, I think you were on the board, we introduced a waiver of all summer school fees for all of our communities to our students. So they already have that in place. So we're talking about a subset, a large subset, but a subset of us.
The argument for waiving all of it, I think, is that A, it's not a large amount of money. It's a one-time thing, right, as Ralph said. B, a lot of families that would not normally qualify under grade day / were hard hit economically because of the pandemic, right? So this is again a sort of exceptional year in that case.
Right. I had lots of notes on this over everybody. Get so aware, so we don't come back later.
Sarah, my only question, so this is gonna come back on Thursday to the board, correct?
Correct.
And
I don't have
so
to
my
watch that.
question is, there
I don't
are
do
three
anything.
things being presented. Are they gonna be three independent things, or are they gonna be bundled? I would recommend three independent things to keep it clean and simple.
That was my expectation, but that's a good question to ask them.
So are you asking for one board memo with three different recommendations versus three board memos?
One more item, but 3 action items related to that one.
Three separate votes. Thank you.
And certainly I would encourage the administration to, if there's something that we're not thinking of, that you think would be best for the only. And I hear about where we get, not necessarily how we get there, right? So if there's something different or better, or
I still want to make sure and I want to make sure the discussion is over and repeat what I have, to make sure that I capture it with the board.
I think the discussion's over.
Okay, waive local credit requirement, graduation credit requirement.
And that's 12th only.
It's graduation requirement. You're not waiving when you're, yes, you kind of are, because you're converting the, waive local graduation requirements for seniors only. This time, one time. Okay, waive summer school fees, including interest, for the summer of 2021, and reimbursing parents who have already paid those fees. The other one is to convert any F to an NC for the entire 2021 school year for grades 9 I need to say that the board needs to be aware that you are now overriding teacher grades. I just want to make sure you know that as well, that you are overriding the grades that they have put in the system.
I think we want to know also the faculty senate position on that.
But again,
I think it would be important for us to know the faculty senate's position on that.
the faculty's position, as I know of, because they were here coming into this meeting, is that any teacher's grade who is changed, that teacher's name be removed as the person putting that grade in, because that is not a grade.
So I guess I don't understand, I'm not an educator, so just to be clear, but and math is also no credit, right? So I guess I'm not really clear on why that might be a sticking point or it's changing.
Yeah,
Linda, did you want to say something? I know they're the teacher of record.
They're the teacher of record, in which case they're owning whatever led to that grade. So the F is not just saying it's no credit. There's something that went into calculating that and it being an earned F. When you do an NC, it's like that's also a choice that's being made, but it wasn't that teacher of record choice. So it's erasing what the teacher is saying was the earned grade and replacing it with something that's just.
And so we would be removing the teacher's name.
I think it's it's a nuanced enough point where your point, I think we need to have conversations in terms of take it on it. The conversations, at least personally, that I have had have all been about the possibility of shifting something that wasn't passing to passing. And I know there's a very strong feeling about that.
That's right.
That is changing. And Dr. Adams made an earlier point about her integrity. With what she says publicly, that's exactly maybe the way that our teachers feel that point. I don't know if I can see exactly, but it's easier to see that it's parallel in some ways. So we would have to do some work there.
Let me just say that from my perspective as a board member, I highly respect and value our professional staff. And in no way would I want them to think that this impugns their integrity in any way, shape, or form. They have, or their professionalism. They have done a just outstanding and marvelous job over the last year and 3 or 4 months since this pandemic started. And we can't, I don't think any school board could ask more from what our faculty has done. On the record. And while I also would like to at the same time thank our students for bringing this forward. We listen to student voice. We listen to student voice. And they are the reason that we're sitting here tonight. And I appreciate that.
I do. I think I have everything we need. One board memo with 3 individual actions. One to waive local graduation required credits for senior knowledge. The second one would be to waive summer school fees for the summer of 2021. And then the other is to convert any F to an NC grades 9 through 12 for the 2021 school year. And we will make that the first item on the agenda.
Can I say something about student fees? I thank you for bringing that up about the students. The piece that's been weighing me on me is the additional participation of the students on a more regular basis. And they're and I think that I know that Dr. Floyd Adams has cultivated a really strong way for students to be actively involved in the decision-making processes of the school, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I can't remember the exact name of the student advisory group that we had. Thank you. Of course, Student Leaders Advisory. So I feel like that's such a great avenue for students to have their voices heard on an ongoing basis. But I also want to acknowledge as the chair of the Cultural Climate and Behavior Committee, that committee is always open to students, and I would welcome as I would imagine, others on the committee, we had long discussions about student voice and that committee started up. And we would invite them to be part of this process with us earlier on in the year, beginning, when the committee begins. And so I did say that because we have an opportunity frequently to address something as it fits when it's in a reactionary way. But I know that the district has been doing so much work and the district has been doing so much work around restorative, becoming restorative and being proactive. And one of those proactive measures is really, I know that we have extended the invitation before, but I would like to extend it again publicly for Royal to join us in CCD and be a contributing member of that group throughout the year, from the beginning of the year and on, because as Fred said, the voices are very welcome and needed and appreciated.
Okay, now.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, for that. All right. And we start the first section.
Yes. Finally.
That's all the information that you were asking for, so I appreciate that. All right. So, we do have a closed session item. Another action affecting on behalf of the district has been filed and is pending before a court administrative tribunal. All the district finds an action is held or imminent, in which case. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, did you call roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Henry. Mr. Martieri.
Yes.
Ms. Harris. Here. Mr. Kowski.
Yes.
Mohammed.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin.
Yes.
And Mr. Kinsler.
Yes. All right, thank you, everybody. There's a different link between things for Gail or close it. Yes, so please log out of this Zoom session. Those of you who are, can read about that, and then through email, we can get to the closed session, we'll come back, but we can mention the balance of the like we'll be heading on. And we'll close out.
I can't break now. I'm still gonna stream this, so. So, Yeah. Okay. I'm waiting until after closed session. So I know everyone on YouTube side can hear, but after closed session, they're gonna adjourn, so it'll be the end. So whenever they get out of closed session, that's when. Nah. Whenever you close up the Zoom link, I always check to make sure. Yes, you'll fully close up the Zoom link and then double check it.
You don't have to, probably, yeah. Do you want to take it and listen? Yeah, perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. I just want to thank you all for your time and energy this evening. The administration, but also the board. I know this is really short notice. So I move. Adjourn. All over? Aye. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Friday and Saturday.